Hi all, today we are going to discuss on the topic preparation of cost sheet. Basically, the cost which is being incurred in the production or cost which is incurred by production of a product or rendering a service is called as cost of production. And the analysis of these cost on the basis of the nature of expenses involved is called the element of cost. So basically, we have three elements of cost, that is material, labor and other expenses. So in detail, we are going to look what is the material cost. So materials are basically the commodities or the products which is being used in the production, or the products which is being used for the production of a finished product, finished good. So the materials, we have two types of materials: direct material and indirect materials. So direct materials are those materials which are directly forming the part of a finished product, or those materials which we can directly allocate to a particular cost center, or which is responsible or which is taking part in the production of a finished product. So such materials are called as direct materials. For example, when we are producing a cotton cloth, the cotton which is being in the major part of the production. So cotton is the cotton we can consider as a direct material. Or when we are producing a brick, the clay is a major component. So clay can be considered as a direct material. So those components which are considered to be forming the major portion of the production of a product, or those services which are directly involved. So that can be considered as the direct materials. So indirect materials are those materials which cannot be conveniently allocated to a particular product. They are forming a part of the finished product, but they are not a major proportion, or they are not in a major they are not contributing majorly to those product. For example, the lubricating oil or the cotton, the threads which we use while we are producing a particular product. These are the nails in the furniture. So in furniture, the direct material is the timber, or the wood can be the direct material, and the gum that we use, or the nails that we use to make a product or make a furniture. The nails are the indirect materials. Next, we have labor. Labor is the human effort that is being involved in the production of a particular product. The human activity or the human effort is the labor. Same, labor is also divided into two types, that is direct labor and indirect labor. So direct labor is that which is being directly engaged in the production of goods and services, or those efforts that can be conveniently allocated to a particular job or a production process. Or for example, the laborers who is directly involved in the production of or the construction. For example, in a construction site, if we can find the construction workers. So they are continuously engaged in the working process of that particular activity. Of if a worker is being engaged in a factory, we have workers and they are engaged in the production purposes. We can call those workers as a direct labor, because they are directly associated with the production of that particular product. We have indirect labor. Indirect labors is that those labors who are not directly directly related to that particular work, but or we cannot conveniently allocate those labors to a particular production purposes. Their activity is being involved continuously, or we cannot allocate that particular labor's work to a particular product. Such type of activity is called such type of labors are called indirect labors. For example, we have the watchman in a factory. If we take an example of a factory, the watchman or the storekeeper, they are the direct labors. because they are not working individually for that particular production of that particular product. Their work is being for the entire factory. The storekeeper is controlling the stores for all the departments. So we cannot allocate that particular storekeeper's activity to a particular department, or the watchman in that factory or in the construction sites, or the supervisors. All these are the indirect labors. The direct labors are the exact workers in the construction sites or in the factory who has been directly working for the production of that particular product. Expenses are the cost which is being incurred while the production or rendering a services. So expenses are those cost which is being happening while a production of a particular product is being done, or while we are rendering a services. Same, the expenses also divided into direct expenses and indirect expenses. Direct expenses are those which are identified and that can be conveniently allocated to a particular cost center. And these expenses are specifically responsible for that particular product, or these are specifically incurred in connection with a particular job. Indirect expenses are those expenses which cannot be identified or which cannot be allocated conveniently to a particular product or a process. So, for example, in the case of direct expenses, we can tell about the royalty expenses or plant hire charges or any equipment hire charges. So, these hire charges or the rent for that particular product that we hire, everything can be allocated to the production of to a particular product or to a particular process, because for completing that production activity or completing that job or that process, we require a particular product, or we require a particular hiring of a particular equipment. So that expenses can be added to that particular product. Unlike the indirect expenses, we can the light expenses or the electricity charges that and all comes under the indirect expenses, because it is being incurred for the production of the whole process or for different products in a factory or in an office or in a construction sites. They don't make only one product. There are many manufacturing is been happening, or different activities is been happening. So that expenses of or that expense of the electricity or light expenses, we cannot directly allocate to that particular product. It has been happening for the different department. It has been happening. So that is called as indirect expenses. Now, when we prepare a cost sheet, what are the components that has to be taken when preparing a cost sheet is what we're going to discuss. We have the prime cost. When we prepare a cost sheet, we need to first find the prime cost. The prime cost is the sum of direct material, direct wage, and direct expenses. When we add all these together, the direct material expenses that we have, direct wages, what we have, and direct expenses together, we get the prime cost. Then is the factory cost or the work cost. Factory cost means the factory related expenses all comes under the factory overheads. So that is the factory cost is the total of prime cost and factory overheads. When we add the prime cost, we have already got from the first point. When we add direct material, direct wage, and direct expense, we get the prime cost. Along with the prime cost, if we add the factory overhead, we get the factory cost. So factory overheads are the expenses which has been related to the factory. For example, we can have the plant and machinery, and all these things comes under the factory overheads. Then we have cost of production. Next component that we have to take in the cost sheet is the cost of production. It is the sum of factory cost and office overheads. So factory cost we have just got in the previous slide. In the previous table, we have got the factory cost. Along with the factory cost, if we add the office overheads, we get the cost of production. Office overheads means the office expenses, office rent, office workers' salary, all these comes under the office overheads. Then the last component that we have to include in the cost sheet is the cost of sales. It is the total of cost of production and selling and distribution overhead. So cost of production, we have already just got in this particular point, we have got the cost of production. Along with the cost of production, if we add selling and distribution overhead, selling and distribution overheads means the selling expenses or distribution related activities. We can take the salesman's salary, we can take the advertisement expenses. All these comes under the selling and distribution overheads. So when we add selling and distribution overhead to the cost of production, we get the cost of sales, and that is the format that we have to follow while we are preparing a cost sheet. So this is the performer of a cost sheet. This is how a cost sheet is being prepared. So we have a particular column, we have a total cost column or cost per unit. So this is the three columns that you need to focus or you need to use while you are preparing a cost sheet. So basically when we have a problem related type of questions, the individual items would be given in the question format, and then you need to prepare a table in this form, and then you need to just allocate different components in different headings to find the final answer, that is the profit. So in that particular accounting year or in that particular year, what is the profit that we have got is the it is to be found out. So as we have discussed, material, what is material, what is labor, expenses, all these components we have discussed. So when we prepare a cost sheet, direct material, indirect materials, we have direct material, we have indirect material. So here we are first taking the direct material, direct wage and direct expenses. All three factors or all three elements are taken here to get the prime cost. As I said in the beginning, in the previous slide, as I said, prime cost is one thing that we need to find while we are preparing a cost sheet. So to get the prime cost, we need to add direct material, direct wage and direct expenses. So we get the prime cost. Only direct, indirect material is not being considered. Direct material, wage and expenses being taken to find the prime cost. Then we have, after getting the prime cost, we are finding the amount there. After getting the prime cost, you need to add factory overheads. Factory overheads, for example, it is the factory rent, plant depreciation, or the factory related expenses, factory electricity charge, factory light charges, all can be, or factory rent, all can be taken under the factory overhead. So all which is being related to the factory is only being considered here. So when in a problem type, all different headings would be given or different items would be given. So you need to check which are the items that comes under the heading factory overheads. So all the expenses or all the items which is being related to the factory is being considered here. And you need to keep in mind that pure financial items, purely in finance nature items are not considered in the cost sheet. So maybe to confuse in the question point of view or exam point of view, if you find questions which is being in pure finance nature, you need to just avoid it, because in cost sheet we are not considering the items which is purely in finance nature. So back to the topic, that is factory overheads, the factory rent, plant repairs, plant depreciation, all are being considered in the factory overhead. After that, you need to add this factory overhead to the prime cost. We get the factory cost. Next, you need to find the cost of production. To find the cost of production, you need to add the administration overhead or office overheads. Another term for the administration overhead is the office overheads. So office salary, office person salary, office rent, office electricity charges or office light charges, all these comes under, even the telephone expenses, it is in happened in the office. So we don't have telephone expense in the factory, because all the operations, administration activities been happening in the office. So office overhead all these expenses, if you add with the factory cost, you get the cost of production. Now we need to find the cost of sales. To find the cost of sales, you need to add selling and distribution expenses to the cost of production. So what are selling and distribution expenses? All the expenses which is being incurred while we are selling that product or while we are distributing the product. So we can include the salesman's expenses, salesman's salary, advertisement expenses, then all expenses which you feel that is being related to the distribution or that has been incurred while we are distributing a product or while we are selling a product. If you add that with the cost of production, you get the cost of sales. And finally, we have the sales with us. The amount of sales would be there with us, and if you subtract that, you will get the profit. Or there can be chances for losses as well. So when from cost of sales, when we subtract sales or when the sales is being deducted, you get the profit. Okay, so situations why we are doing this particular or why we are finding cost sheet is in order to identify whether the unit is running profitably or whether what are the measures that can be taken to control the cost are the reasons why we are preparing the cost sheet. So particularly the person in charge of the cost control will prepare this sheet, and thereby he or she can find out what are the where are the areas where the expenses is being or more, or where can we reduce the cost so that more profit can be ascertained, or if the certain year is under loss, preparing this particular cost sheet will helps to analyze the reasons for losses, which area. For example, if when we compare 2-year statement, maybe the administration overhead, the cost has been increased, so unnecessary cost has been happened in the office or administration area. So you can control that. Or maybe the selling and distribution expenses has been increased, or unnecessary expenses has been happened comparing to the previous 2 years. So they can analyze is that expenses necessary. So that can be analyzed to find whether the company is been allocating the expenses properly or utilizing the expenses properly. So a cost accountant would be preparing this particular sheet to analyze how the company is been performing. So that is why the sheet is being prepared. Thank you.